Why hello there my Tanukers. Today I am excited to bring you my complete guided playthrough of the post-game Bloody Palace mode in my favorite game, Devil May Cry 5. Not only have I been wanting to do this for a while, but I should be posting this on the day of the game's 1-year anniversary, so I wanted to do something to commemorate it. Anyway, yes, there are timestamps for each floor, so if there's a specific floor you want to watch and see what strategy I use or a specific boss on how I beat that boss, you can go straight there. Anyways, you see the breakers I go ahead and grab. These first few floors aren't that difficult. If you're having trouble with these first few floors, then you're in for a bumpy ride. So for these first few floors, I'm just going to talk about general strategies, things that are applicable for any floor, and even the game to some extent. So as you saw, the breakers I got, the tomboys here are just for fun, because the tomboy is the coolest breaker in the game. Punchline is the best, but obviously they're all viable. They're all pretty well balanced, but some of them have more niche uses. But anyways, the punchline I say is the best all around, but the tomboy is the most fun. But the ones I grabbed before that, the breaker arms, I have those in the back for later on in the run, because I wanted to go ahead and get those at the back end of my loadout, since you can't cycle through Nero's breakers. So, for anyone that doesn't know, or for anyone that's just starting Bloody Palace mode, there are no difficulty options, unlike in the game, because the difficulty gets more and more extreme as you progress. So these first few floors are on the easiest difficulty, and then the next collection of floors is Devil Hunter difficulty, and then of course Son of Sparta, and then at the very end Dante Must Die. And it doesn't explicitly say when the difficulty is changing, but you can definitely feel it, especially in terms of how much HP these enemies have. Also, as you can see, the tomboy can make pretty quick work. Not only is it the most fun breaker arm in my opinion, but it makes pretty quick work of certain floors because it just shuts down enemies' ability to attack you completely. Also, these death scissors here, I missed the parry the first time, but as you see here, if you parry the death scissors, you can actually kill them in one hit. It's indicated by the little red effect around their head. So if you parry them and you see that red effect getting emitted from their face, that means they're vulnerable for a one-hit kill. They're also vulnerable for a one-hit kill if you break one of their scissors. If you're just hitting them, if you're hitting them as they are guarding, and you break their scissor, it happens twice, right? Because one of the scissor blades breaks, and then there's the second one. So if you grab them immediately after a scissor breaks, you'll go into a grab animation that can kill them in one hit as well. Also, these enemies are also enemies that are very susceptible to the tomboy's ability to shut them down. Both the Nilo and Proto-Angelos are pretty good targets for the tomboy, especially if you can catch multiples of them in one attack and take them into the air. And you've probably noticed by now, but I don't go into the next floor until I have my, as a rule of thumb at least, there are some exceptions, but I don't go into the next floor until I have my Exceed Gauge maxed and also the Color Up maxed out. So back to explaining the Bloody Palace mode. As I said, it gets more and more difficult as you progress, but you want to really make sure that you are getting... So the thing is timed. You see the timer at the top, and of course if the time runs out, you have to start all the way over. Of course, more obviously, if you die once, you have to start all the way over, but I'm assuming you know that. So the timer, you have to keep an eye on the timer. It may not seem that the timer is super strict early on because you're getting so much time in these early stages. These are also good enemies for Tomboy. It may not seem that strict, but as you progress further and further into Bloody Palace, it's going to be more and more difficult to actually gain time from each floor because the modifiers, such as the no damage bonus, becomes less and less significant. Plus, it takes you longer and longer to beat each floor since the enemies are getting more HP and there are more of them. And yes, there's no randomness to this. Each floor has a predetermined enemy composition, so it should be the same each time you go through. So you want to really make sure that you're getting these no damage bonuses on these first few floors, because these first few floors is where you're going to make the majority of your time. make the majority of the time on your timer. This is stage 9. So the pattern is that each floor okay, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 are all difficult floors. And as an unofficial pattern, the floor before each of those is sort of an easy floor where they let you heal up. As you saw, those tentacles drop health. And so it's a little extra assurance to make sure that you are healed up for the boss fight. So you have no excuses! So here's the first difficult, in quote, floor, as I was talking about in the pattern. So being floor 10, they throw a whole bunch of Empusas at you and Empusa Queens. And of course, you should prioritize the green bugs, the little flying green bugs, because, well, you can only unlock this mode if you've beaten this game, so you must know this already, but in case you've taken a break or something and you're getting back into the game, they heal the enemies. They heal other enemies, so you don't want them to undo the work you've done. So go ahead and just kill them first. Sometimes if you can separate them, you know, you can save one for health just in case you get hit, and then you'll want it later, but most of the time you just want to dispatch them quickly. I'm gonna go into Showdown here, I think. Yes, I do. No damage bonus. There it is. So as you see, I got a pretty good amount of time from that. Significantly because of the no damage bonus. As I said, that's very important to be getting on these early stages. But of course, don't feel bad if you're not, because this takes a while to get good at. I started Bloody Palace mode. I started practicing Bloody Palace mode after just beating the game on Devil Hunter difficulty. So it was definitely a rude awakening for me. But I imagine that if you've already beaten the main game on the higher difficulties, it won't be so much of a shock. And the reason I get rid of my arms here is so that way I can put my Buster Arm and my Ragtime, or another Buster Arm and Ragtime at the back end of my breakers. Because again, I want to have those Buster Arms ready for late into the run. And there are 101 floors, and the reason why I didn't mention any floors after 90 when I was talking about the pattern is because the pattern sort of breaks after 90, because 101 is Vergil, 100 is an Urizen fight, 99 is an Urizen fight, and so is 98. Yeah, 98 is, these enemies suck, by the way. These cleavers, I like using the tomboy against them so I don't have to worry about their super armor once you start taking them into the air, but sometimes they are able to whack me and break my tomboy. So you have to be really careful around these enemies. Anyways, as I was saying, 98, Urizen on his throne. 99, Urizen with the tentacles, Hentai Urizen. And then 100 is the Urizen after he's eaten the fruit. And then 101, Vergil, obviously, final boss. Also, the plan is to record this commentary all in one take, pretty much. So if there's any strange dead air, it's just because I'm analyzing the gameplay and thinking of what to say. Because in some instances, the gameplay will speak for itself. And yes, I am using the DMC4 battle theme because Nero's theme in DMC4 is the best music in the whole franchise. His theme in DMC5 is pretty good too, but it's not as aggro. So these guys are super tanky. Even at this low difficulty, these guys take a long time to kill. And even if you start juggling them in the air with Tomboy, you don't get to go up very high before they fall out of it. Which is why I come back down with Tomboy's downward attack pretty soon after that. Also with Tomboy, it's extremely easy to get the Bringer Knuckles each time because each attack comes out so slowly. At least relative to your non-tomboy attacks. And I should mention this earlier rather than later just to save a life. It's very unintuitive, so I was really surprised when I heard this. And this will come into play much more evidently later as the run progresses. But remember this. Enemies will not attack you. They will not start an attack if they are off screen. So when you're fighting enemies, you want to have the camera viewing as few of them as possible. Which, like I said, sounds very unintuitive, right? So, it's like, it always makes me think of what you can't see can't hurt you, which is obviously wrong. And it makes me think of, like, a kid in a bed scared of a monster or something from my closet. And so I just hide under the covers, like that's going to help me. Like, that's going to save me from a monster in my closet if there's one there, right? Behemoths here. The behemoths here, you can break their shackles extremely fast if you target their tail. You saw how fast I broke it there, and immediately after breaking it, they will go into a grabbable state in which you can grab them and do showdown in front of them. They take double damage in their mouth after the shackle has been broken, so you can eliminate them very quickly in that sense. So, obviously you can break their shackles by attacking them elsewhere, but if you keep attacking in the same spot, it will not break, which is sometimes a good way to build up meter if you want to make sure you have the meter to go into DT before their shackle breaks. Not relevant yet, of course, but will be when they have more HP, so their shackle can break. Just remember, their shackle can break really easily when you hit them in the tail. And then they will immediately go into a grabbable state in which you can grab them, and then they take double damage in their mouth tentacles after their shackle breaks. You can see I start doing some light core jump canceling against these bats. These flying enemies are the worst. And these red flying bats, the lava bats, once you get them down to a certain HP threshold, if you leave them be, they will actually explode and hurt other enemies in an AoE. Even though I shot it there before that could happen, because there was no need. Oh, nobodies. Okay, nobodies are some pretty interesting enemies. Something about this game is that there are so many nuanced mechanics and attributes about enemies that the game does not explicitly tell you. So there's a lot going on with nobodies. Look at that sick armbar. I love Nero's grab animations in this game. So the nobodies, they put on different masks, and depending on which mask they wear, there can be 3 different masks. They can be wearing 3 different masks at any given time. So depending on the mask they're wearing, it'll change their moveset. And you can actually parry them as they are putting on a second mask, or a second or third mask. So as they're putting on a mask, you can parry them, and then they'll drop it. And they only have a maximum of 3 masks. They have 1 of each mask. But then, once they drop all 3 of them, they won't attack you. They will only attack you when they have a mask. Furies are the actual worst enemies. I highly recommend going into the... I forgot the name of it, but essentially the labbing mode in this game. I highly the Void, that's what it's called. I highly recommend going to the Void and practicing parrying these Furies, because these Furies are the #1 things that throw a wrench in my runs, or at least they used to, until I practiced them a lot. So stage 19, another easy, in quote, stage before stage 20, which is the first boss proper, which is Goliath. And of course, these treasure goblin type Empusas, you need to kill them before they get out, so you can get the orbs. And I think they also give you a whole bunch of time for each treasure goblin Empusa you kill. You get a whole bunch of time for it, so you definitely want to try getting them. So, of course, there are many ways to take on each boss. One of the great things about this game is how many tools it gives the player, and you can use as many or as few as you like. Personally, I like shooting him immediately, because you need to... Okay, so if you're going to shoot him, if you're going to have the color up charged up, you might as well The reason why I jump back immediately is because for this boss fight, they actually spawn you within range of his roar, and if you try to shoot immediately from the starting position, he will interrupt you. His roar will interrupt you, and then you'll have to charge up color up again. So if you want to shoot him like that at the start, you need to jump backwards. And then, oh, feels bad, man. Breaks my tomboy there. I love using the tomboy's spinning attack on this boss fight because I feel like Levi from Attack on Titan when he fights the Beast Titan, and he just spins like a buzzsaw across the Beast Titan's body. So, I highly recommend that. Using Tomboy against this boss, just to feel like Levi from Attack on Titan. Anyways, this is the easiest boss in the game, according to the game itself. So my strategy here is pretty self-explanatory. Nothing too fancy, just being efficient and using my breakers periodically. When I first beat this boss in the main game, it's mostly because at this point in the game, since it's early, I didn't have much of the aerial stuff. So when I fought him for the first time, I stayed on the ground a lot and just rolled through his attacks. But having all of his Nero stuff unlocked, I just usually stay in the air a lot. I just keep charging my Exceed with air taunt, and then shooting him and going in. See, there, look at that. There it is. There's one of those attacks. It's even more fun when you go down his back. These projectiles are pretty easy to avoid. Pretty telegraphed. I'm pretty sure you can even avoid them by walking, but I like rolling or doing air taunt just to be safe. I also like staying near his back, so I can just keep hopping on his back, because as you see, he hunches over a lot. So when he's doing these big swings and punches, you can avoid it. So long, Bowser. I know I'm not the first one to make that joke, but there's no way this isn't based off of Super Mario 64. And if you are playing Bloody Palace right after, you know, hot off beating the base game, so you're not super familiar with Nero's Devil Trigger form, when you're in the grab animations, you can mash the shoot button to keep throwing out those spectral swords. I should have mentioned that earlier just in case, but I'm so used to it, I forget that it was sort of a novel idea, sort of a novel feature when I first learned about it. So we took care of him pretty handily. You can also use your Bring Your Knuckle during Showdown. So whenever I use Showdown, I am mashing the shoot button and the Bring Your Knuckle button. And since I'm talking about control scheme, I have the shoot button set to L1, so that way I can be charging the gun during combos. So I pretty much always have my left index finger on the L1 button. It's either always charging the L1 button or pressing the L1 button, and I have my left middle finger on the L2 button ready to press for the Exceed gauge, because other than putting L1 for the gun, the controls aren't too different from default. I have Devil Trigger on R2, and on the D-pad I have the button that throws away your breaker, because I for some reason I kept accidentally pressing that, and I would hate that, right? I kept accidentally throwing away my stuff, and so I just assigned that button to the one that I am least likely to accidentally press, which is the D-pad, like I said. Some more of these cleaver enemies. These cleaver enemies get that purple effect quite a bit, which makes it where you can't grab them. And so if you pull them up in the air, you should try to take advantage of it by not throwing them down immediately. That was an accident, by the way. Weird flex. I think I set the controller down, and since I have Devil Trigger on R2, it accidentally pressed it. But much better that than throwing away my breakers. Okay, even though this is still pretty early in the run, this floor is actually pretty hard to do without getting hit. So, remember I said that an enemy won't start an attack animation if they are off screen. So obviously if they start an attack animation and then you look away from them, it'll still go through and they'll try to attack you, but they won't start an attack animation off screen. But since this whole floor is just a bunch of flying bats, it's really hard to take one single enemy up high enough to the point that you can't see anyone else. So I so often just get sniped from some bat that's just barely on screen here. So I recommend taking these as high as possible, and there you see they can explode, as I was explaining earlier. And I don't know why I did that. I think it's because I kept waiting and waiting and waiting for it to explode, and it seemed like it was taking a while, and I just tried to hurry it up because maybe I thought something was wrong with it. That was weird, though. But I pretty much made that more difficult for myself, so don't do that. If you see them swelling up, they're going to explode. As I was saying, though, there goes the no damage run. Yeah, these projectiles are pretty rough. Whenever there are bats, whenever there are either of these two bat enemies on a floor, they're typically pretty high priority. By that, I mean you want to prioritize getting rid of them before other enemies. Obviously, it's contextual based on what the floor is, but for the most part, the bats are pretty high priority enemies because, like I said, they can just snipe you by barely being on screen, and it's super annoying. "24. Speaking of high priority enemies, these Baphomets and the Baphomets are the goat enemies here. I forget the name of the other enemy, the one with all the mouths. I for the longest time, for some reason when I was playing through the game, I thought they were called Legion, right? Because it makes sense. Because it looks like a whole bunch of mouths put together, like it's some sort of compound entity. Plus, it looks a lot like Legion from Shin Megami Tensei. So I'm just going to call them Legion from here on out. You can correct me in the comments if you want, but the Baphomets and the Legion here, both of them are zoner scum, and they are also super high priority, because if you leave them be, they will start shooting you with some crazy magic. Here's another Fury. As you can see, if you grab them in the air, you won't fall, which is good to know. So fighting the Furies becomes exponentially more difficult when there are other things on the screen. You have to really choose which thing you're going to prioritize. I really like being able to parry the Fury, and to do that, I need to pretty much focus on them. And so I try to focus the other enemies here first, while keeping the Fury off screen, so I don't have to worry about it, but I can kind of see when he's teleporting in. I've just practiced fighting Fury so much, I can instinctually just know when they're about to do something. And also with the Fury, after you parry the Furies, you are limited to a certain amount of attacks before they teleport away and pretty much return to neutral. But if you launch them, you get an extra hit. So as you watch me fight more Furies, I have a pretty standard operating procedure when it comes to them. Parry them, and then I use the move where the charge move where you hold the button and you jump in and you do a hard knock-up. And then I launch them and shoot them with my color-up shot, which should be charged. These Empusa Queens seem to get staggered a lot. Okay, 27. Here's a floor where I break my rule of thumb by entering the next floor with my color up fully charged. Because this immediately spawns 3 enemies that are all pretty susceptible to Tomboy's juggling ability, I just go in immediately with Tomboy charged and just walk up and try to catch all 3 of them at the same time. I love these goofy wrestler moves for his grab animations. I usually play grappler characters in fighting games, so I really like being able to grab these enemies for the same reasons. More of these buzzsaw lizards. Tomboy's so cool. You never really get to use it much in the main game because it only spawns in a few spots, and you're likely to lose it as soon as you start using it. So I'm glad that they give you an opportunity to really push it to its limits here. Another heal up stage. I should come up with a terminology for this. Prep stage, like prep for the boss. Or the difficult stage. Because 30 isn't a boss here. It's... Anyways, it's stage 20 a boss, stage 40 a boss, stage 60 a... I might as well say it. So, 20 is Goliath, 40 is Artemis, 60 is Voltaic Black Knight, the best boss fight in the game. And not just because he has the best music in DMC5, his theme song. But after that, 80 is Malphas. And then 90 is Cerberus. So it's every other 10, but then at 90 it sort of breaks that. These scythe enemies are pretty low tier, and they're pretty susceptible to Tomboy, but I still find myself getting hit by them a lot just because of the big hitbox on the scythe. Like I land on them or something. But I managed to get through them here. And then a whole bunch of these cleaver enemies, which is sort of tricky to deal with. A lot of times what I do is I just try to thin them out by pulling them up, hitting them a bit, and then grabbing them. And then after I've thinned them out a bit, I will pop DT and use his projectile move. There's so many moves in this game, I forget the names. I usually just come up with my own names for moves and use that. So Nero's Devil Trigger only move, not Showdown, but the other one, the one where you have to input back, and he shoots out this like cross slash projectile because it has a pretty wide hitbox, so it's basically mowing the lawn with all these enemies in front of you. So these teleporting enemies here, these Hell Priests, they're really gimmicky, so you might notice they teleport around a lot, right? And you can't catch them. Well, they always teleport after any sort of hard knockdown. So if you're just wanting to deal as much damage to them as possible in a short amount of time, you actually need to not do any moves which knock them down. So don't do a full color-up shot. It's better to do the color-up shot one tier below max, because it won't knock them down. And then, of course, if you're going to hit them with melee, it's better to use attacks that won't knock them down, like I said. Unless you want them to teleport, which in some cases you might want them to. So you don't have to worry about them spawning in enemies, because these do spawn in enemies. So these are sort of high priority, but you want to at least make sure you're giving them attention every now and then and interrupt them if they start trying to spawn in enemies. So as I'm fighting them, you can see which attacks don't give them hard knockdowns and which ones do. But of course, they can still teleport sometimes, even without you doing the hard knockdown. It's just that they always do it guaranteed if you do any sort of hard CC crowd control. So that was stage 30, not too bad. I would say it's pretty easy up to Artemis. And then in between Artemis and Malphas, it's not hard, but it's not easy either. And then after Malphas, it gets hard. The enemies have so much HP. As you see, I'm pretty much keeping this loadout I have. each time I go into a rest area, there are a couple cases where I change it up. Notably, the rest area before stage 70, I change it up so I can have a rag time more accessible in the loadout, because the strategy I use to take on stage 70 specifically uses rag time. And I don't want to have to break a whole bunch of my breakers to get to it. I mean to do the move here that takes me up, but I was a little too far under it, which made me do that move. These bats have a strangely high amount of HP, too. You'd figure they would be pretty low HP enemies, but I guess they have to make it worth it since they do explode. And all the other enemies that spawn on this floor, I'm pretty sure are Empusas, and so the pretty obvious strategy the game wants you to do here is to make this guy explode and blow up all the Empusas, which you will see now. Textbook. The fact that all the Empusas spawn below you after you start hitting the bat makes that pretty evident. Of course, there's not any one way to do it, but that seems to be the intended design of that floor. Double scissors. I find it much easier to parry enemies without my exceed gauge filled up. So on the floors, so when I go into the floors, which I remember start with scissors or furies, I usually get rid of my exceed gauge before I go in there, so I can parry them more easily at the start. Then I parry both of them at the same time here, which is really cool. And then I managed to shoot the second one in time. What sucks is, lots of times when I parry two at the same time, and you kill one, it's really hard to lock on to the other one without accidentally locking onto something else. Like right there, I was worried it was going to lock onto the nobody instead, but fortunately not. So as you can see, he's putting on another mask there. Also, the masks that they put on changes their damage receiving properties, sort of like in Monster Hunter, where different parts of the monster incurs more damage. So one of the masks, it takes equal damage from both its front and back sides. One of the masks, it takes double damage in the front and half damage in the back. And then the last mask, the last of the three masks, is the inverse of that. It takes double damage in the back and half the damage in front. And like I said, there's no predetermined order to these masks. So you just have to remember what each one... You just have to remember the properties for each mask. Like I said, there's so much to this game. It really benefits you to learn the attributes and behavior patterns of each enemy type. I definitely learned a lot about this game. I learned a whole bunch about this game in my process of beating Bloody Palace. I originally beat Bloody Palace. My first successful run in Bloody Palace was early in December last year. And I actually do have it recorded. I have it recorded, and I used it for reference when I was getting back into this, just to see which breakers I took, etc. But the plan was to upload that. The plan was to upload that, my first successful run, and make that the guide. But there were a few embarrassing moments because I keep mentioning stage 70. I have a strategy for stage 70 that I'm really proud of, and I even have a quick kill method for Urizen fight number 2, which I pull off in this run. Spoilers. But none of those went according to plan in my first successful run, even though I won. I still won, obviously, but I knew I could do better, so I didn't want to upload that. I wanted to wait until I got a better run, but I didn't want to play it again immediately afterwards because it's sort of exhausting playing through this. It's sort of mentally and even physically exhausting on your hands. After playing this in one sitting, my hands are always shaking. This game gives me arthritis, carpal tunnel syndrome. So So obviously this floor is a bunch of lava bats. Pretty much just stay super high. And when one's about to explode, try to lead other bats into it. So yeah, I didn't want to do it again immediately afterwards because I felt like I had to invest so much time and energy into beating it once. I wanted to sort of recharge before I tried it again. But I'm kind of glad in the end because now I get to upload it to commemorate the 1-year anniversary. And the fact that the official Twitter page is tweeting about the game's 1-year anniversary and using a hashtag, trying to start a hashtag going, hashtag DMC5 anniversary, is making me think that they might announce something on the anniversary date, which is March 8th. But of course, this video is being published on March 8th, so you will already know if they announced something or not. More than likely, they haven't. If they do make a special edition, I could totally see it being a PS5 game, since the next gen is right around the corner. If they make a deluxe edition of this on PS5, that comes with everything the... Well, I guess there's already a deluxe edition, right? I guess special edition, I should call it. Complete edition. So if they make a definitive edition, special edition... Yeah, special edition, I think is what they call them. If they do make a special edition for this game, if it includes everything the deluxe edition has, and it includes playable Vergil, playable Lady and Trish, and it adds turbo mode, that would be quite the complete package. It's already my favorite game, but it definitely needs turbo mode. And obviously, Vergil DLC will make money. And I'm already pretty sure that... Look at this, I'm pretty sure I get every parry here on each of these scissors. A 1, a 2, a 3. Clean. I'm pretty sure they're already working on Lady and Trish DLC because they barely have any involvement in the story. So I feel like they're only put in here as a DLC bait, especially with the after credit scene in the game. Again, breaking the buckle, grabbing the Behemoth using Showdown while mashing the shoot button and the Bringer Knuckle button. New record, nice. After a certain point, the grab into Showdown will not be enough to insta-kill the Behemoths, but it still does a big number on them. So it doesn't matter too much how good of a time you get there, but I found that... So if you're locking onto something and use that attack that propels Nero forward as he spins, and then if you re-lock onto something else, you actually change direction. So you can actually take out more than one tentacle there if you change directions. Like you can take out the first tentacle, the one that's closest to you, and then change your direction to the side. This is sort of a weird pre-boss stage. Because there are actually a lot of enemies on this stage before they give you the health. And I've noticed that they always make the 10 stages preceding a boss fight sort of thematic. So since the boss fight coming up shortly is Artemis, they put a lot of flying enemies in the floors preceding Artemis, since Artemis is a flying enemy. So when you throw them straight down, obviously that puts them on the ground quickly for them to explode after they're below that threshold. But if you pick them up on the ground as they're exploding, Nero will actually spin it around and throw it where you're facing. I don't think I ever do that in this run, but keep that in mind in case there's a group of enemies in front of you that you want to blow up. Double scissors. It's kind of risky going for the parries here, because if you get hit, you don't want to incur a whole bunch of damage right before you go into a boss fight, but I'm pretty confident with this, and it pays off. And I don't even want to try fighting Artemis with tomboys, so I go ahead and get rid of those if I still have any left at this point. So I can start using Punchline, which, like I said, is the best breaker in the game, just overall. It's free damage. It's literally just free damage. You throw it out, you don't even have to think about it because it keeps punching the opponent. Speaking of free damage, that's another thing I like to do whenever I'm doing a grab animation on someone. So before I grab an enemy, I release my color up shot, whatever it's charged to, ideally fully charged, right? So I'll release a fully charged color up shot, and then throw out a punchline, and then immediately grab them. So that way, as I'm grabbing them, they are incurring damage from punchline, and as I'm mashing the shoot button and the bringer knuckle, well, I guess bringer knuckle only works for showdown. So if it was showdown, they'd be incurring the damage from all three. But in a grab, during a grab animation, if you throw out punchline right before grabbing them and you're mashing the shoot button, they're going to be not only taking the damage from the grab, but taking the damage from the spectral swords and punchline. And there's a whole bunch of crazy particle effects going on whenever you do that. So it's pretty fun. And again, this is one of the earlier bosses in the game, so chances are it shouldn't be too hard for you. It's sort of a unique boss fight just because it's the only flying boss, and it's sort of a zoner. So at a certain point, it's going to fly up. You need to shoot these little satellites it has, and then once you shoot them and get them down to their minimum health, you can grab onto them to pull you up. So you want to do as much damage as possible there to get her in a stagger state. And as you can see here, I throw out punchline right before grabbing her. And the grab, in addition to the spectral swords, I'm pretty sure the grabs do more damage. They do, in fact, do more damage if you're in Devil Trigger before you start the grab. I'm pretty sure. That might just be a superstition, but I do it just in case. But you might as well, just so you can start doing the spectral swords, like I said, so it doesn't matter. And yeah, you saw all the particle effects. The particle effects from the spectral swords, and then the blood spatter effects from the punchline punching it over and over. It's crazy. The attack that I've been using on the bats up to this point is pretty good against Artemis too. The attack that lets you stay in the air. It's the attack, attack, pause, attack. Because it sort of elevates you again. This hyper beam here, you can just get behind her. I think I almost get a no damage run here. I think I get hit right at the end. Let's see. Oh no, I did get no damage. Nice, plus 2 minutes. Yeah, that's significant. I think it's Cerberus. I think Cerberus is the fight where I almost get a no damage run, but then right at the very end he gets a hit on me. That dirty dog. So is it after stage 40 we get a change of scenery here? Let's see. Yes, we do. So we get a nice change of scenery here. Nice and dark. But it's not just a color palette swap. The environment actually does have some subtle differences. Like, see that cloak up there? It looks really cool. Stage 42, another good floor for Tomboy. Definitely. The floors following bosses seem to be sort of easier as well to break up the pacing, which makes sense. and then they start scaling again. Just in terms of enemy composition. And it starts scaling again for the next set of 10. But of course, the actual difficulty in terms of the game difficulty, like the enemy HP numbers, the enemy damage numbers, that never goes back down. So juggling those enemies is a pretty good option. Oh, I can't believe that got me. Juggling those enemies is a pretty good option to keep them from teleporting. But I went ahead and stopped so I could take out these healers so I wouldn't have to worry about them undoing my work. And if you've been playing Bloody Palace, it should be pretty apparent as to why I decided to do my commentary after playing instead of doing my commentary as playing, because playing through this requires a lot of focus. Playing through it well requires a lot of focus, and so I wanted to allocate all of my focus on the actual gameplay so I could make the best gameplay possible. And then, of course, also the best commentary possible, because if I was doing commentary while playing, either the gameplay would have to be compromised or the commentary would have to be compromised. So this way I can focus 100% on both. I'm so used to pulling those enemies up in the air and hitting them with Tomboy so quickly that I wasn't so used to them doing their little spinny attack, even though it's not particularly difficult to dodge. Do I use Showdown here? Yes, I do. I go ahead and cancel DPs just because I had topped off my health, and so I didn't want to use any of it, any more of it. At this point, you have to really start managing your DT with your health. And yes, I don't have all of the health upgrades from the game. There are still a few that elude me, and I think I'm missing a DT upgrade as well, but obviously the last missing health bar is a little annoying. But that proves that you can obviously beat this just fine without getting the max upgrades. But of course, it'll be better if you get everything. I'm going to soon. I'm going to get everything. I want to 100% this game, but I'm taking my sweet time with it just because Bloody Palace is so much fun. I'd rather be spending my time in that than scavenger hunting. So normally I would try to focus on the Fury here first, but because these Empusas you can take out so quickly, I try to just thin them out really fast so I can focus on the Fury. Give her my full attention. Yes, that's a female. The Furies are from Greek mythology, which are female. And that's a pretty typical pattern I go with when fighting Furies. But of course, if there are other enemies on the screen, at the same time, I would not go into the grab because then I'm just going to get hit out of the grab. Keep in mind, though, that you do have super armor in Nero's Devil Trigger. And so if you do go into that grab animation and you're worried about someone hitting you and interrupting you, you can actually pop DT mid-grab animation just as a shield, basically, because you're still going to incur the damage if somebody hits you, but it won't take you out of the grab animation, so that way you can still get your damage in. Which I sometimes do on stage 70, if I don't manage to kill all of them fast enough. So this floor is pretty hairy. Oh, there goes Tomboy number 1. I already said the nobodies are hard. They have so much HP. They have a strangely high amount of HP. I don't typically go through this floor gracefully. I just try to take them out as quickly as possible. Because you don't want them to all get into their... You don't want them to all put on their mask where they start throwing out those eyeball bombs. It gets really hard to manage if it goes on. So yeah, I'm not thinking about style at all here. I'm just 100% trying to kill them as quickly as possible. Speaking of those eyeball bombs, if you ride your punchline arm, like the hoverboard, you can actually evade the eyeball bombs that way. You won't trigger the explosion. You can just hover over them. So if you do end up with a whole bunch of eyeball bombs bouncing around all over the place and you're really worried about getting hit by them, and you have a punchline at the ready, so in this case I could just get rid of Tomboy and then have a punchline ready. You can just go into your hoverboard, and then it's less of a problem. And stage 50 here is going to be triple Empusa Queens. Well, that would have been a good floor to start with Tomboy. Just immediately pick all of them up. That's what I would have done if I knew what the enemy comp was going to be. Ooh, that was close. The Empusa Queens can jump pretty high, so if you're going to be attacking an enemy in the air with an Empusa Queen on screen, you want to make sure you're pretty high up. And in the event that an enemy does grab you, such as the Empusa Queen, before you incur damage, there's a window where, you know, because they go into a grab animation as well. So they grab you, and then... Oh, look, that even happens. Wow, speak of the devil. I was going to say that you don't have to use your devil... You don't have to break your devil breaker to get out of that. You can. That's one option. You can break your devil breaker to get out of that immediately. But you can also pop DT, and it breaks you free. I purposely got grabbed so I could demonstrate that, obviously. What's going on here? Oh yeah, okay, Behemoth. So, Behemoth is actually a pretty low priority enemy, because so long as they are shackled, you can sort of avoid them. You can avoid them relatively easily. So you do not want to break the shackle on them and then have to fight them with other enemies on screen, because their hitboxes are huge when they attack you, and they do so much damage. Yes, it's all telegraphed, but the hitboxes are huge, which make up for the slowness of it. So there, I took out all the other enemies first and then saved the Behemoth for last before unwrapping him, essentially. Opening him up, breaking open the shackles. It's like opening a present. Save it for last. Wait till Christmas before you open your presents. That's the rule of thumb with Behemoths there. Especially because you want to go into showdown on its mouth as soon as you... So, as soon as you break his shackles, you want to grab him, and then you showdown on his mouth, so you're going to be vulnerable for a while to other enemies, which is why it's nice to save them for last, so you can get by with that. Okay, here's stage 50 coming up. Like I said, it is 3 Empusa Queens, which is pretty annoying. It's kind of hard to style over this stage. So what I do is I pretty much just hop around in the air a lot, shoot them with my fully charged shots, and throw out Punchline. I'm pretty much just using Punchline and my gun to do damage here. And the Empusa Queens are going to be jumping around a lot, so likewise, that's what you're doing. Just keep hopping around, using your air taunts to stay up there. You're pretty much making laps around the perimeter of this map, shooting and using Punchline. If you keep doing that, it's super easy and you don't have to get hit. I think I get a little daring here because I'm starting to get bored of just jumping around, and then I pay for it, so take that as a demonstration of what not to do on this stage. Between punchline and your gun, you actually do a lot of damage. It doesn't take that long, really. And I guess if you have a whole bunch of punchlines, and you know you can just get some more after this, if you manually break your punchline as it is punching an enemy, so if you throw it out as it's automatically punching an enemy, if you break it, it'll explode and do a good chunk of damage. So that might be one option to try to speed this up and still be just as safe. Next rest area. I should be keeping the same breaker loadout here, so I should be getting my punchlines and my tomboys back, yes. Whenever there's more than one of these enemies on the screen, you sort of have to balance your attention between the two. I guess at this point, it's not as important because they die fast enough, but later when there are multiple treasure goblin Empusas on screen at once, you have to really bounce between them. Because the amount of time it takes to kill one, the other ones will have scattered away by then. That's a pretty simple stage. I was trying to think of something to say about it. Doing that combo where Nero just keeps whacking them over and over again, which is attack, space, and then you mash attack. Getting the exceed gauge on that each time and getting Bring Your Knuckle on that each time is super hype. I pulled it off once, but I have to be focusing really hard, so I usually don't go for the Bring Your Knuckle there because I don't want to risk accidentally doing a grab. Or not a grab attack, but grab by pulling yourself in, because obviously I would be locked on at the time. So again, I have to prioritize the mage enemies. They have some crazy attacks. If you leave them be, they have this giant AoE, which is really hard to get out of, and it does a whole bunch of damage. They can spawn in this plethora, they can spawn in this whole array of lightning balls, and it turns into a bullet hell at that point. And then they can also shoot out this lava beam. All of them are pretty dangerous, so yeah, prioritizing them, and then I can calmly parry the scissors, the death scissors. The fake out. You thought this was going to be easy. Triple behemoths. You ideally want to take out one at a time. And specifically, you don't want to have more than one unchained at any given time. You want to kind of wait until one is separated from the other two. Dang. Sideswiped me there. You want to sort of wait until one is separated from the other two and then break a shackle and try to get the grab and showdown. But that'll be very dependent upon if the others are going to come in and try to attack you fast enough. So I just want to build Devil Trigger here. I sort of alluded to it earlier, but ideally I don't want to break their shackle until I have enough Devil Trigger to do a showdown after grabbing them. And so if you keep hitting them in the same spot, aside from the buckle on its tail, if you keep hitting them from in the same spot, it will not unshackle them. You have to pretty much break the shackle all around their body if you're going to do it that way. So if you keep hitting the same spot on their body, like their side, for example, you can actually build up Devil Trigger pretty safely that way without worrying about them getting unshackled. And these guys definitely look like Resident Evil enemies. I know the first thing I thought when I saw them throughout my campaign playthrough is that they look like a Resident Evil enemy. Speaking of which, I do have my DMC5 playthrough still on the YouTube channel, with timestamps as well. That would be a good stage to start with Tomboy active. Trying to get them closer together so I can hit 2 at once. They seem to be a little bit too far away there. A little late on grabbing him there. No biggie. You have to be really careful there, too, when you're waiting for him to do an attack. His attacks have a really wide range on them. Take out the Baphomets first. Plus, the Angelo is pretty slow. So you can pretty much ignore him until last. Whoa, look at that fancy camera work. Who was responsible for that? I don't see many people using Tomboy either, just because it's such high risk, high reward. And even then, I don't think it's the optimal way to do damage, but it's just so fun. It looks so impressive. It feels so impressive when you're actually pulling it off. So again here, I try to bait the one standing into getting close to the one that's on the ground, but they take too long. Here we go. They are such tanks. They have so much HP. And I'm so used to fighting these guys with Tomboy that when I find myself without Tomboy and I have to fight one of these guys, I'm sort of at a loss because I just have to wait for them to do an attack. And then I go in and get a few hits, and then I have to wait again because they block. But they're not particularly difficult outside of them being time-consuming. More Angelos. Death Scissor. That was sort of a risky Tomboy activation there. You might not know that the activation and deactivation for Tomboy actually has an attack hitbox. So you can actually parry attacks by activating Tomboy, which is super big mood. That's just obviously a very bold thing to do, because obviously if you mistime it, you're going to get hit and then have the Tomboy get broken immediately, which is feels bad, man, whenever you get your Tomboy broken quickly. So on this floor, what I like doing is I like getting rid of the tentacles on one side and then leading the Angelo over there so I can fight him without getting worried about getting poked by the tentacles. But I'll have the tentacles on the other side of the map saved, so that way after I fight the Angelo, if I got hit at all, I can still top off my health. Because I don't want to waste all the health pickups and then fight him, because then if I get hit, I won't be able to heal after that. And if you're, you know, far enough away from the tentacles, you don't really have to worry about it. But still, keep an eye on them just in case, like that. It would suck taking damage from a stationary thing like that. So on to stage 60, which has the best boss fight in the game. He's sort of this game's version of Kratos from DMC4, just in terms of it being the best boss fight. For the same reason, because this is the boss fight that you can style on big time if you practice it enough. This is the boss fight that feels the most one-on-one with the fewest gimmicks. And like I said, it's just really fun to style on once you practice it a lot. Ironically, though, despite this one being my favorite, and me having actually practiced this boss a lot a while ago, I haven't practiced him at all recently in the meantime before I recorded this, because I had been spending all my time practicing the hard bosses and not the ones that I was really familiar with, so he sort of catches me off guard at the beginning here. I usually have a pretty consistent standard operating procedures at the beginning here. Pretty consistent way I open the fight, but I get a little shook at the start, but then I bring it back. And this is the best music track from the whole game. I really like this music theme. Unfortunately, the audio mixing on it seems strangely bad, and so I looked up a cover of it on YouTube, and I found one I really like, which really brings out the song's full potential. If I remembered the YouTuber's name, I would give him a shout out. I might do it in the comments later. So as the Voltaic Black Knight is charging up his sword like that, you can tell when he's about to do his big AoE, because in his sword you can see it filling up. You can see the inside of his sword filling up with that lightning. So it's literally it's basically a loading bar letting you know when he's going to do the big AoE. And if you do enough damage to him, before he finishes that, you can actually interrupt it. But I was just going for the safe option there by hitting him from a distance, because I had plenty of options to hurt him from a distance there. But if you do want to do enough damage to interrupt him, you need to go up there really fast and do showdown. And then of course, if you have punchline, throw the punchline out before you do showdown, and then as you're doing showdown, make sure you mash the bringer knuckle and the gun. So again here, just hitting him from a distance, because his sword is already filled up pretty high. For the most part, I just jump to avoid his attacks and do air taunts, and I get most of my exceed gauge from air taunting. And then when he has an opening after an attack, I just dive in to expend my exceed gauge. So after he does that big teleport, he does the 3-hit there. He does the 1 hit, and then he teleports again, does another hit, teleports again, does a 3rd hit, and that's when I go in and attack. And then that little thrust he did just there, jumping up to avoid that's actually kind of risky. It's actually more consistent to roll to the side to avoid that, because lots of times I try to jump to avoid that, and he still hits me out of the air. So you might want to keep that in mind if you're having trouble avoiding that attack. But a pretty straightforward boss fight. Like I said, not very gimmicky. That's why it's my favorite. He looks super cool. Feels like a one-on-one fight. has the best track in the game. Okay, so I break my trend of... I change up what my breaker loadout is here. So I get rid of the punchline. And as you see, I get that. I pause it so you can see on screen what I have now. So that's because I want to make sure I have a ragtime. I want to have a ragtime close enough to the start that when I get to stage 70, I don't want to have to break a whole bunch of them to get to it. But I also don't want it so close to the start that I'll have a high chance of losing it by the time I get there. Like you see already, this is a super good stage for Tomboy, but then I blow it by losing it. Losing Tomboy on the first floor after a rest area feels bad, man. So literally, I have a punchline and then the ragtime. So I wouldn't want my ragtime to be the first thing available after the Tomboy, because then I would be too worried about using it. Of course, I do have the second ragtime just as an emergency backup, but if I were to use that, I would have to get rid of a bunch of my breakers. So theoretically, if I did lose this ragtime that's close to the front of the loadout before going into 70, I would just break all of my arms up to the next ragtime. That's why I have that extra one. The ragtime near my breaker arms, or buster arms. Have I been calling it breaker arm? The buster arms. The grabby, the big red grabby arms. My ragtime by the buster arm is my backup ragtime, just for any of the stages with Furies, because whenever I start a Bloody Palace run, Furies are 99% chance the thing that will kill me if I end up dying. So I like always having a backup for that. Because independent from the strategy I use in stage 70, if you use Ragtime's charge attack as Furies are teleporting around, it actually disables their teleport ability. As in, you can actually hit them as they're flying around, because it's almost as if you stop time as they're teleporting and you can interrupt them. Kind of cool. It's kind of like the Quicksilver scene from X-Men. Just in terms of being able to hit things because you're going so fast. Things that would normally be moving too quickly. Sort of a weird comparison, but you get what I mean. From X-Men Days of Future Past, the movie specifically. I don't know why I neglected to mention the subtitle. There are several X-Men movies. But if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Starting to go on tangents, these floors here are pretty simple. It's not really introducing anything new. Man, the enemy looks a lot bigger when you're up close like that. So as that enemy is spinning in place, if you shoot at it, and you break part of their spines, they will actually swerve. So you can stand directly in front of them and not move at all and just keep shooting them. And if you manage to shoot them enough and break their spines before they start spinning at you, they will actually swerve around you. So you don't need to worry about stepping to the side. It's pretty cool when you do that, but I didn't want to risk it. Because I haven't gotten used to that enough, because like I said, I usually always fight those enemies with Tomboy, and that's what I'm used to. Okay, so the Fury here. I'm not really sure who I was trying to prioritize here. I think I was trying to just balance them, because if I prioritize the cleavers, I can't kill them fast enough to not worry about the Fury. And I don't want to focus on the Fury when I have the two cleavers around, so sort of a messy floor. Again, Furies complicate things. Oh, wow. That was barely mistimed. What's nice about the grab animation with the Fury is that it automatically launches them afterwards, which lets you get the extra hit. Because as I mentioned earlier, if you launch them, you get an extra hit on them before you have to wait on them to finish teleporting again. Behemoth. Because ragtime is what I have at the front, I still use it, but I only want to use it sparingly because I do not want it to break before 70. So I'm only using it in times where I know I'm safe like that. Tanuki! Trying to act like a combo matter for a moment. I keep trying to get to this guy's tail. Look, he keeps turning. Keeps trying to keep his tail from me. Coming for that booty. I threw out ragtime there because I was curious what would happen. I don't think it really did anything since I went to a grab animation, though. Tentacle Arena. The Fury in the middle. So just like that stage with the Angelo, I clear out the tentacles on one side so I can pretty much stay over there and not worry about them. And then at that point, it's just 1v1ing the Fury, which should be no problem if you have practiced parrying their attacks. If they just immediately jump to the side like that and start teleporting around everywhere, they are not going to do an attack afterwards. So that attack that they do when they bring their arm across their body, that's the fastest attack that comes out. So once you lab them enough, you should get that down. Gun twirling. Empusa Queen. What else is here? 67. Stage 67. Lizards and Empusa Queen. Simple enough. This is normally a stage I use Tomboy on pretty hard, but obviously I don't have Tomboy at this point. Because I really like catching all three of those lizards with the Tomboy. And as I'm doing it, sort of graze past the Empusa Queen every now and then, so I'm technically hitting 4 enemies at once with Tomboy, which is pretty cool. Just out of range. Ooh, that was close. Empusa Queen almost got me. At this point, it should become apparent. The inherent issue with the lock-on should become apparent at this point in the game. At this point in the run. Because I keep trying to lock onto the lizards, but I'm locking onto the Empusa Queen, which is obviously not what I want to grab, because that will pull me down, which is the opposite of what I want. I want to pull the other enemies up, not me getting pulled down. So, it's really weird. So this really threw me off when I was playing through the campaign. You push in L3 to change the lock-on to a different target. But it seems as if that only works if you are perfectly still. As in, you need to be inputting no movement inputs when you switch targets for it to work. It's really weird. It seems like a weird oversight. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it. That's one of my few gripes with the game. Everything else would be nitpicky, but that seems like a really weird oversight, and it seems like it would be easy to fix. I hope they fix that in Special Edition. I'm pretty confident Special Edition will come out. It's just a matter of when. Armbar. The armbar would not work in real life, though, because he doesn't have his legs over his body. He doesn't have his legs over the nobody's body, so he doesn't really have any leverage to pull the arm, but who cares? It looks cool. He probably has enough force to just muscle it. So now we are on stage 69. Very nice. So as we are getting into stage 70, let me explain my strategy here. So what I do is, I want to enter stage 70. Well, I guess I should wait to talk about it until I actually get there, so that way, if people click on the timestamp, they can hear the strategy. Okay, so, stage 70. I want to enter stage 70 with my ragtime fully charged. This floor is going to be a pretty big difficulty spike, and even then, this is one of the most difficult floors in the game. Or in the whole Bloody Palace mode. So I want to enter the room with ragtime fully charged, because the first thing I'm going to do is release it, but not immediately. So I will release the ragtime charge attack after the middle Fury spawns in, specifically when he raises his head. So the middle one spawns in first, and then the other two. So I release it, pop DT, pull in 2 enemies, and if you walk to the side and get them both lined up in front of you and you go into showdown, you can actually nuke 2 of them immediately and have 2 of them assassinated from the start. So then by the time the ragtime attack wears off, by the time the freeze time ends, you only have to deal with 1. Obviously, though, in this case, I wasn't able to kill both of them. I killed 1 and got the other one pretty low, which is still pretty good. It's because I didn't walk around enough to the side and get them lined up directly in front of me, so ideally that's what you want to do. So, I would recommend practicing stage 70 by itself and practicing that strat until you get it consistent, because dealing with 3 Furies at once is quite the hassle. On my first successful run, which I recorded, it hurts me to even say this. What happened is, when I came into this room, I released ragtime, but mid-animation of me using the ragtime attack, I popped DT and it canceled the ragtime attack, but it still ate up the breaker. So I basically just threw it away for nothing, and I didn't get the freeze time, and I had to deal with all 3 of them at the same time. I still beat it. Obviously, though, like I said, it was my first successful run, but that was supposed to be a highlight of the run because I was pretty proud of that strat. So I'm glad I got it this time. So I hope that was helpful. So now I'm going back to my normal loadout. Tomboy, Tomboy, Punchline, Punchline as my first 4. I mentally conceptualized the first 4 of my breakers as the disposable ones, and then the 4 after that as the ones for late game that I really don't want it to dip into. Because, theoretically, if I lose both my Tomboys and both my Punchlines, at the next area, I should be able to get both of them back, since there's 2 of each. So giving us some health, which could be very useful after 3 Furies, if you lose a bunch of health. Also, weren't there 3 Furies? Aren't there 3 Furies in Greek mythology? I don't remember specifically if there's an exact number, but usually I see Furies depicted in 3, so I'm wondering if that's why they decided to make a floor like that, just in addition to it being difficult. Or if that just might be a weird coincidence. Maybe I'm thinking of the Fates. I think I'm thinking of the Fates. I don't know if they specify a number of Furies. Maybe it's 3 Fates. So, I should be prioritizing the bats here. There I go. I know what's happening. I'm having trouble locking onto the bat. Yeah. Again, the lock-on in this game is kind of bad. Just in terms of trying to switch targets. I did notice it in the main campaign, but it didn't really become an issue until Bloody Palace, just because Bloody Palace is much more difficult than the campaign on Devil Hunter. And I didn't find out about how to unlock the higher difficulties without beating the game. Like, obviously, if you beat the game on Devil Hunter, you unlock Son of Sparta, but there's a secret way to unlock them. So, since finding out, I have unlocked every difficulty in the game, despite only beating the campaign on Devil Hunter so far. Because what you do is, if you beat Urizen at the very beginning in the prologue chapter, you get this secret joke ending where the credits roll really fast. And they lived happily ever after, basically. And then you can unlock Son of Sparta difficulty that way. And then if you do the same thing on Son of Sparta, you get Dante Must Die. And then you do it again, and you get... Is it Heaven and Hell? Yeah. And then you get Hell and Hell. Or maybe that's the other way around. But anyway, you can unlock all the difficulties by just fighting the Urizen prologue boss, which is pretty funny. So I've unlocked all the difficulties that way. Because I don't want to go through Son of Sparta. After playing Bloody Palace, I just want to play the campaign on Dante Must Die. I want to go straight from Devil Hunter to Dante Must Die. I don't want to have to do the one in the middle. Since Son of Sparta is going to seem easy to me now after doing Bloody Palace so much. And stage 74 and 75 shouldn't be any big deal, but stage 76 is actually one of the trickier ones. Stage 76 is a bit tough. Good stage for Tomboy. Do I use it here? Since I already lost one Tomboy, I might be a little reserved about using this next one. No, I'm not. Whew. See, when they run in with that scythe, scraping across the ground, it always makes me worry because that hits me surprisingly a lot. Okay, so Legion spawns in. He should take priority. Good thing I didn't have Tomboy active there. I keep trying to get to him. All these other enemies are blocking my way. Try to take him up, see? Separate him, isolate him from the rest. It's a pretty good rule of thumb that isolating an enemy from the rest by taking them in the air lets you focus on them, and you don't have to worry about getting hit from other enemies. That hasn't become apparent already. I think Matt Walker even explicitly said that in a Twitter post or something when Bloody Palace first came out for April Fool's Day. When they announced the Bloody Palace mode, it was funny. It was this April Fool's joke. They were advertising it as if Empusa would be a playable character. They probably have it on YouTube still somewhere if you want to go watch it. It's a lot of cleavers. And a Behemoth. So yeah, again, save the Behemoth for last. I just popped DT here because I'm trying to thin them out as quickly as possible. Using Tomboy here wouldn't be a bad idea either, but like I said a moment ago, I think I'm just being reserved with it. And of course, when the Behemoth burrows underground, you need to be ready to avoid that when he pops out. So I pretty much just jump around in the air until he does that. Because I don't want to get sideswiped. Yeah, doing that downward thrust with the Exceed gauge seems to be a pretty good attack to use on these cleaver enemies, especially when they're all clumped together. Because it's so hard to CC them in the first place since they have all this super armor. And does this kill? Or is it too high up in the difficulties now? Let's see, we'll showdown kill here. Okay, so showdown is still killing at this point. New record, nice. 76, here it is. The enemy comp here is really tricky. So you have 2 nobodies, which are already really high priority. Because I've been hesitating to say this because I can't say this definitively anymore. But I'm pretty sure that nobodies, if you let them finish their dance, they actually spawn in more. Because I remember that happening once, and then me being so taken aback by it that I decided to never let them do that again. So I'm pretty good at stopping them from doing that. So I haven't seen them do it in so long. It makes me doubt myself. It makes me think that maybe I imagined it up in the first place. So anyways, assuming that's true, you can fact check me on that if you want and correct me if I'm wrong, but both, if that's the case, both the nobodies and the hell priest here are both able to spawn in enemies, so it's really hard deciding which one you want to prioritize. What I kind of do is I do a hard knockdown. Each time I see the hell priest, I do a hard knockdown on it to make it teleport to kind of stall it while I try to do damage to the nobodies, because I do not want the nobodies, at the very minimum, I do not want the nobodies starting to spawn their eyeballs. So even if they don't spawn in more nobodies, if they start spawning in the eyeballs and the hell priest starts spawning in its own enemies, it gets really hairy. 76 can get out of hand if you don't take care of it quickly. So the faster the better on that one. I would say so far, the stages that stick out in terms of being tough are 70 and 76. So far we've seen 2 of the, what I would call, difficult ones. I have trouble, see, again, the lock-on messes me up there. I did parry the Death Scissor in time, but I couldn't attack it because I was trying to lock onto it and I was locking onto a different enemy. Here we go. $78, more Baphomets. And you can't grab them when they have that aura of ice around them. So you really do need to just run up and meet them face to face. And if you're still sort of unfamiliar with Bringer Knuckle, in addition to doing a little bit more damage, using Bringer Knuckle on moves that would normally knock enemies away will keep them in front of you. So it's a good way to keep a combo going. Turn what would normally be a combo ender. Turn what would normally be a combo ender into a non-combo ender. So I pretty much ignore the Angelo here, probably. Trying to take out these guys. Doing the move where doing the back to forward move in the air to close the distance is a good way to get in there because it doesn't knock them down, so they won't teleport after that. And it'll leave you in the air, so then you can do the aerial attack I've been using so much, the attack, attack, pause, attack, to keep juggling them, since that doesn't make them teleport either. I can't believe I'm getting hit so much by these guys coming out of the ground like that. That really was catching me off guard for some reason. I think that's the last time it works on me, though. And if you hold lock on, if you don't let go of lock on, it'll still track them as they're teleporting. So you don't have to worry about trying to find them. You don't have to worry about finding them again if you stay locked on. So, next stage is Malphas. So I don't care if I lose my tomboy here. Because just like Artemis, I only want to use punch lines on Malphas. This isn't taking forever. Even with Tomboy. Ugh. That pains me, even though it doesn't matter. Still pains me to see a Tomboy get broken. Finally. Top off my health. Ready for Malphas with my punch lines. And I'm embarrassed that Malphas took me so long to beat in the campaign. For some reason, Malphas was the boss fight that took me the longest in the main game. But Malphas is pathetically easy in this. And I think it's because when I was fighting Malphas in the campaign, at that point in the game, I didn't have all of the aerial things unlocked. And I didn't have air hike unlocked either. So it was really hard for me to stay in the air for a good amount of time. So I kept getting hit by that move where it jumps up and hits the ground. I kept getting caught on the ground when it was doing that. But once you have all your stuff unlocked, this boss is pathetically easy. Just keep running around, waiting for it to finish its nonsense. Once it spawns in, shoot it, throw out punch line, and just keep attacking it. And you want to always save an air hike or a taunt or something so you can keep yourself off the ground, because when it does its little jumping in place attack, it'll have a hitbox on the ground and you want to make sure you avoid it. And when it turns black like that, when it covers itself in that black sludge, it does a lot of damage. So even though it's still kind of easy to avoid the attack, sometimes when that happens, I will just pop DT just in case I get hit. But when you're able to do enough damage and stagger it there, throw out punch line, or I shoot my gun, which should be charged up fully, throw out punch line, so that way the punch line can do its work as I am using the grab, while once again mashing the gun button, so that way the spectral swords are hitting it while the attack animation is going. That's pretty much all there is to this. I think I do a no damage run on this as well. So I'm glad I got my revenge after it did a number on me in the main game for some reason. Look at all those particle effects. The bit rate! We don't even get to see her big attack, her big final gambit attack that she usually does at the end. No damage bonus, nice. I think that's a new record. Yes, it is, plus 3 minutes. Redemption. Redemption as in me redeeming myself after having a hard time against it for some reason. Which you can see in the DMC5 playthrough on the YouTube channel, which has timestamps. So you should be able to find the boss fight really quickly if you just want to see that, see what I'm talking about. So after this is when it gets pretty hard. This is where you need to start really trying to get good. I was sort of shocked after this at how big of a difference it is. And I'm back to my usual breaker loadout. So we should be getting a change of scenery here. Yes, and it's just a bunch of Empusas, which may not seem that threatening, right? But I think the reason why they did this is so that way you can see even the lowest tier enemies in this difficulty do a lot of damage. If just a single little Empusa hits you once, it does a lot. You need to be extremely averse to getting hit at this point. The first time I made it to this point, I got hit by an Empusa. It shocked me. It's a huge difference. It's much more significant than Devil Hunter to Son of Sparta. Devil Hunter to Son of Sparta is a much less significant jump than Son of Sparta to Dante Must Die. At least it felt like that to me. Speaking of the change of scenery, this place is really creepy. Look at these floating, what look like, they look like bird skulls. These floating bird skulls with these crystals emanating outwards from them. The previous scenery, being all dark, was the more stereotypical creepy atmosphere just because it was dark, but the fact that everything is tan here, and the fact that the ground has this multicolored design underneath what looks to be some sort of crystal floor, it's very intriguing. It's sort of morbidly intriguing. It's not an orthodox scenery that you would see, so I appreciate it. Especially the way the background is waving, it makes you feel like you're in a very volatile place. Like there's some sort of impending disaster about to happen. It's creepy. In other words, the scenery's unsettling to me. So if these guys didn't have a lot of super armor before, they definitely do now. A lot of people recommended to me as I was trying to beat this for the first time and live streaming it on the Twitch channel, of which you can find the link in the description, by the way. When I was live streaming Bloody Palace to beat it for the first time, when I was at this point, some people were recommending to me to use the, dang it, what's it called? The electric one. It'll come back to me. I haven't used it in so long. I haven't used it since the main campaign. Dang, why can I not remember? Anyway, it'll come back soon. The electric one. The big, if you stand still and use it, it's the big electric hand. They were recommending it at this point because it has such hard knockdown properties. It's pretty much the only way to reliably knock down enemies at this point. At this difficulty, the enemies have such poise, you really need to use that breaker to stagger them if you want to. I considered it, but I like the loadout I'm using here. But I know a lot of people like using that arm. Overture! That's the name. I was remembering it. It's literally the first one you get in the game. Wow. Yeah, Overture. I was having to rack my brain there for a moment. It's literally the first one you get in the game. That breaker, I know a lot of people like for the Dante Must Die difficulty, just purely for the fact that it can knock down enemies, and is pretty much the only thing that can knock down enemies at this point. I know a lot of people like Gerbera as well, just for the mobility aspect. And because the enemies have so much HP at this point, my strategy is to just take them as high. I messed up the jump cancel there. My strategy is to just take them as high in the air as possible. Do my easy jump cancel combo for as long as possible. And then pull up the next enemy in line. Watch, rinse, repeat. I thought that was going to kill them at that point. That's why I went ahead and just did that. Not much to say at this point. It's really a war of attrition in these later stages because you have to be in the air and be consistent enough with your air combos and jump cancels that you don't fall on the ground too much, because you know, so long as you're on the ground, you're able to get hit. And this really does a number on your hands. This is where you get the carpal tunnel syndrome. Having to do all this over and over again, since it takes so long for the enemies to die. It's extreme. Yeehaw. I don't use that throw very much. It's sort of hard to aim it. But obviously if you hit an enemy with that throw, it'll hurt them. And having 46 minutes at this point is pretty good. Having 46 minutes in the stage 80s pretty much guarantees you that you won't run out of time. So I'm really not worried about time at all at this point. I'm literally just worried about keeping my health and managing the devil trigger. More bats. I try to focus the bats first and then do the little green bugs later. Just in case I get hit, because if I get hit, I'm going to eat a lot of damage. So I kind of want to save at least one green bug that I can use for help, just in case I get hit while fighting the bats. But I keep trying to pull the bat away from it, and it keeps flying near it. And of course, I'm focusing the explosive one first, so that way I can use it to hurt the others. I'm waiting to see if I wind up healing that green bug. And if I don't, I'm wondering if it winds up healing it. Nope, throw it down in time. Nice, okay. Yeah, so I get to save that. So as you can see, the AoE is pretty significant there. It's pretty generous. But you can be caught in it as well, so make sure you're not standing in it. In the blast radius, obviously. And even with the no damage bonus, I'm going to be losing time on each of these stages just because it's so hard to get time at this point. Remember earlier on, I said that the majority of your time is going to come from the early stages. Because it gets more and more difficult. It gets progressively more difficult to accumulate time on the timer. Okay, this floor is pretty tough. I would say this is another one of those... This is another one of the tough stages. Stage 70, 76, now 85. So, you definitely want to save the Behemoth for last. You do not want to have the Behemoth unshackled running around with the Nobody and the Empusa Queen. And what you really want to watch out for is that you do not want the Nobody or the Empusa Queen to break the shackles on the Behemoth, because they actually can. That happened once, and that was no bueno. So, you do not want to aggro the Empusa or the Nobody into the Behemoth, because they will break the shackles, and then you'll have to deal with all three of them at the same time. So, try to keep the Behemoth away from the other two. The Nobody should take precedent over the Empusa Queen, but if you can only hit the Empusa Queen and the Nobody is right by the Behemoth, just go for the Empusa Queen. But if you can hit the Nobody or the Empusa Queen, go for the Nobody first. Oh, yep, look at that. The Nobody did summon in another one. So, yes, it is, in fact, possible if you let them finish that dance. So, do not let them finish the dance. No fun allowed. No fun allowed in this fun house. So, that is why you want to focus the Nobody, in addition to the eyeball bombs that are now bouncing around. So, I was starting to sweat here. So, focus the Nobody first. Empusa Queen comes second, but you can still deal damage to it every now and then if you have a clear shot on it. You just want to make sure that if it's right by the Behemoth, you do not attack them and the Behemoth at the same time. You don't want any sort of collateral damage on the Behemoth shackles until you are ready to break them off, which should be after these two are dead. And definitely at this point, breaking the shackle into a grab into showdown is not nearly enough to kill the Behemoth, so you actually will have to deal with them after that. But remember, they incur double damage on their mouth. Or I don't know if it's double, but they incur the most damage on their mouth. And Behemoth at this difficulty can literally two-shot kill me. So, getting hit by that is one of the worst things possible. So I should be finishing off the Nobody here shortly. Yes, that was a lot of orbs. Okay, so I'm charging up my meter. If my meter wasn't charged up that much at this point, I would just keep shooting him in the same spot over and over, so that way I could build meter without breaking his shackles, and then I would go around behind and try to break the buckle on his tail. But I have everything charged up now, so I try to break it. Which I do not do quickly enough before he goes underground. So it should break this time, yes. So I shoot him, pop DT. Oh wow, I go through him with that. That might be more optimal, actually. Nice. I thought of that on the fly, too. And then go into Showdown, which will still leave him alive. So then at this point, okay, the reason, okay, that damage got, I'm pretty sure I was still in DT, so that damage got reduced. Because when you have super armor in DT, the damage does get reduced. So at this point, he can 2-hit kill me, and he's going to be swinging around those mouth, tentacles, tongues. It's like a giant split tongue. He's going to be swinging around those tongues, which do big damage. They can 2-hit kill me at this point, so I just want to play it safe and shoot them from a distance, because he incurs so much damage at that spot that just shooting it does a significant amount. So I don't want to get over there at all. And I want to keep jumping over him as he's doing this. Make sure you do not land on him. Make sure you don't land on his attack as you're falling, because he turns in place and tries to hit you again. So you want to make sure you always have, you're always saving an air hike or an air taunt there. So you don't dip down and get whacked by his tentacle tongue. So that's definitely one of the tougher stages. So off the top of my head, 70, 76, 85 are the three tough ones we've covered already. 94, if I'm remembering correctly, is another really dangerous one. It's not particularly difficult, but if you don't take care of it fast enough, the Legion enemy will... There are two of those Legion enemies, that have the magic attacks. If they start spawning in their electric balls, it turns into bullet hell extreme. And it's really hard to manage all of that. But you'll see that soon enough. Oh, 88 as well. 88 has 2 Furies. That's coming up really soon after this. 88 has 2 Furies. And even though it's one less than stage 70, it's more difficult than stage 70 because we are in the max difficulty. You can still use the ragtime strat for this. For stage 88, you can use the ragtime strat. But I don't think I do, because I can multitask. I can multi-manage 2 of them much easier than 3. Even though they do more damage, I can. I'm good enough at parrying them that I can pretty much handle both of them at the same time. Handle 2 at once. As long as I keep parrying them and I don't get hit, it should be fine. And to get to ragtime, I would have to get rid of both of my tomboys and both of my punchlines at this point, and I don't want to do that. Because it's pretty good that I haven't lost a single breaker at this point. I don't know why they decided to give the enemy so much health. When they were tweaking the numbers in this game, and they just kept upping his health, or maybe it was higher and they kept bringing it down. I don't know what made them decide, yes, this is the perfect amount for this enemy. It seems very out of place. Look at this. Just keep wailing on him. Like I said, it's a war of attrition. It just takes so long to kill each enemy, you want to make sure you don't get hit at all. Because even if it's not that hard to get hit, if it takes that long to kill an enemy, your chances of getting hit during that time span is much more likely. So I know that the next floor is the double Fury, so I go ahead and get rid of my Exceed Gauge here because I find it easier to parry without the Exceed Gauge. And so you could use Ragtime here, but I just attacked him from the start to get a little damage off. because I'm not using ragtime. Oh wow, I can't believe they got me. So I don't grab him here because I know that the other one is starting his attack, and I don't want to get knocked out of my grab animation. Although if you really wanted to go for it, like for example, if you knew it was going to kill, if you knew the grab was going to kill, so you wanted to go into it, you could use DT, so that way if you were to get hit during the grab animation, you would just absorb the damage and armor through it, and finish the attack. You have to do a lot of jumping around. You kind of have to sort of wait until both of the Furies' attacks are staggered. Well, until they're not staggered, I mean. So, if they're staggered, right, if one is attacking while the other one's winding up, and vice versa, if one's attacking while the other one's winding up, the one that was winding up will then be attacking while the other one's winding up. And so you'll never really get a chance to attack one. You want to kind of just jump around a lot until you see them both sort of... you basically have to keep waiting for an opening. Wait for an opening in which you can parry one without having to worry about the other one interrupting you as you deal your damage. You really just have to practice the Furies a lot, and it becomes more instinctual, if anything. Just looking for openings. It's weird saying looking for an opening, because it's a weird way to... It's not literally an opening. Oh, look at that. Catch both of them at once there. That's nice. So I make sure to not lower my guard at all during this stage, which is why I'm being very liberal in my use of DT here. Because I know that if I'm going to die in this run, this stage is a very likely culprit. I don't know why I did that early there. I guess that was nerves after playing for so long. Because I'm usually pretty good at parrying that. He did... that attack, the fact that that attack landed right at the end made him do so much, or her, made her do so much damage to me. Look at that. I barely have any health now because I got hit right at the end. It's always right at the end that the enemies get a final hit on you, trying to drag you down with them. Fortunately, there's a health floor right after that because pretty sure the devs are aware of how difficult the double Fury is. And then stage 90 will be Cerberus. A pretty easy boss fight as Nero, honestly. And I go into Punchline because, again, Punchline is just a much safer breaker to use against boss fights. At this point, the stakes are too high. I don't want to risk anything. And I am so glad that they brought Cerberus back from DMC3. Such an iconic part of DMC3. It's just a big piece of fan service that he's in here. And they even expanded on the Cerberus theme even more to make it even better, because now each head corresponds to a different element, and whichever one is taking control at any given time determines which element it's using to attack you. So obviously the fire one is active right now. When it's in fire mode, that's probably when I'm getting the most melee attacks in, because his attacks are so big and telegraphed when he's in fire mode. I can pretty much stay on his back and keep hitting him. At this distance, though, I don't want to fly in there, because usually he attacks me as soon as I fly in. He's not literally reacting to me, it's just, that's how it be. So then, you know, I usually wait for him to come to me, and then when he's right there, I try to stay near his back. And I did not know his tail could hurt you there. The little fire on his tail hit me there. That was news to me. So rip the no damage run, but at least we learned something there. So the lightning head is taking over here. So he has a lot of zoning abilities at this point, so I pretty much stay back when he's in lightning mode. Also, I don't know if this was in the original DMC3, but recently, so DMC3 recently released on the Switch, right? And I was watching someone play it recently, and I saw them fight the Cerberus, which is pretty early in the game. I was watching them fight Cerberus from DMC3 on the Switch, and I noticed that each head of the Cerberus has different colored eyes, each one corresponding to the 3 elements in this boss fight. So one head had blue eyes, one head had yellow eyes, and one head had orangish red eyes. And it made me wonder. Of course, that's a stagger animation, so I shoot him, throw out punchline. I think I forgot to throw out punchline there. I think it's because it was already out, so when I pressed it, it brought it back, and I didn't realize it was still out. And then you do have time to go into showdown after a grab here, even though I keep messing up the input because I'm not doing the directional things correctly. There we go. Even when I messed up the input and the showdown came out late, I still had time to do it and get away safely. Anyways, though, I was wondering, it made me think, wait, did the original DMC3 is in, you know, the PS2 release, did the original release of DMC3 have each Cerberus head with a different colored set of eyes? Because if that's the case, it makes me think that they had this concept of a tri-elemental Cerberus ever since DMC3, and maybe they just didn't have time to execute it or something. And so they just stuck with one, which was ice. Which makes this boss fight even cooler, knowing that the developers got to fully execute a theme that they were thinking of for a while. So if that really was in the original release of DMC3, I'm thinking that they had this concept for a while and they finally followed up on it. Because I think it would be really weird for them to try to change that for the port to make it more consistent. Like, maybe they tried to make it consistent with the Cerberus, biology they invented in DMC5, but I can't see why they would bother doing that. Anyways, this is supposed to be a guide on how to beat Cerberus, not me theorizing the DMC lore. But like I said, it's pretty simple. When he's in ice mode, you pretty much want to be running around in a circle around him to avoid the ice. And I'm filling up my exceed gauge by doing the air taunts. And then in between the icicle drops, I shoot him, throw up punchline. And then of course when he staggers, I go in there and grab him and use showdown. Back in fire mode. Don't get greedy, obviously. I've noticed that with the bosses, especially on Cerberus for some reason, that he actually has a little bit more HP than it says. So even if you bring his HP bar down to 0 and it looks like 0, he still actually can take a few hits. So don't get super reckless near the end. Just keep it steady. And I'm trying to stay on him because I always like finishing the bosses off with a melee attack, right? Especially when it does that slow motion effect. It always looks cooler when you finish off a boss with a melee attack. It's more cinematic. But obviously when he switches, he forces me to get away. And I haven't mentioned this yet, but when you activate Devil Trigger, you actually have a few iframes. You have a few moments of invincibility when you activate Devil Trigger, and you can actually do that to stay right by him when he switches modes if you time it right. So if you time the Devil Trigger activation with that big AoE attack, you can actually just avoid the damage and not get knocked back. But the stakes are so high on stage 90, I just go for the safe options. And there, I do finish him with a melee attack. Now, something I do make use of the iframes for the DT activation is the Urizen fight number 2, which you will be seeing pretty soon. Since we're already on 90. So we're in the final stretch now. And here, I change up my breaker loadout. I paused it because I was looking at what I had, trying to remember or think of what I should be using. So while I do have those 2 Buster Arms near the back, just because if it runs out to the back at this point, it's going to be in the last few bosses, I still get another Buster Arm near the front. Because there's a quick kill method I have against the Urizen number 2 fight. And it requires Buster Arm. But Buster Arm is still super useful against the Urizen fight after that and Vergil, just because it does so much damage. Which is why I have those 2 Buster Arms at the back. Because on these last few boss fights, the Buster Arm is the most valuable thing. So, These Treasure Goblin Empusas can actually attack you at this difficulty. I did not know that originally, and it caught me off guard. When they smacked me, I had to do a double take. I was about to say, did they just attack me? Did they just do what I think they did? So yes, they actually can attack you. If you're hitting them in the back, they can kind of back up into you. It's not even telegraphed. So it's really shocking. So they have so much HP at this point. So I'm pretty sure there were 3 Treasure Goblin Empusas there. I wasn't paying too much attention because I was talking instead of watching. But I'm pretty sure there were 3 Treasure Goblin Empusas there. I have yet to actually kill 3 there. So I just settle for getting 2. The fact that they have so much HP and it takes so long to kill them means that you're going to have to really bounce between 2 to keep them from running away. Because if you just focus on 1, by the time you kill it, the other one will be long gone. And so I settle for 2, because if I try to bounce between 3, I'm likely to lose 2. Of course, focus these ranged attackers, these Baphomets. Do not want to get hit with ranged stuff at this point. And 94 is approaching, so that bullet hell stage that I've been talking about is coming up. I think 93 is the onslaught of Death Scissors. Let's see. There is an onslaught of Death Scissors coming up. There's a stage where it's just Death Scissor spawning in after Death Scissor, and you want to really just parry it. Yeah, okay, here it is. So you want to parry it and kill it in one shot as quickly as possible. Because if you fail just one of these, they will start building up, and then it becomes a problem. Because then you have all these Death Scissors on screen at once. But I do a pretty good job of keeping it down. So now I only have 2 left. See, if you messed up one of the earlier ones, you'd have to be dealing with like 5 right now. 5 or 6. Which would become much hairier than what's going on here. So that was literally textbook perfect. New record, nice. Theoretically, that was exactly how it was meant to be done. And 94, so you want to go for these ranged attackers as quickly as possible. But again, just like the same principle with those Treasure Goblin Empusas, it takes so long to kill each one that you're going to have to bounce between the 2 to keep the other one from doing its thing. But in this case, they're not running away, they're going to be spawning all this crazy magic, so you just want to keep both of them in check. So I'm specifically using moves with hard knockdown. Because they have the giant AoE attack, and then they have the lightning, which turns it into bullet hell, and then the lava beam. And I think one of them even manages to get the lightning attack off, so you will see how big of a deal just one is. You can imagine if they both use that attack, it gets hairy. Turns into bullet hell up in here, like I said. I love bullet hell though. It's one of my favorite genres. It's so underappreciated. And I'm on fire. I think I realized that. Now? Man, maybe I didn't even notice. I let myself stay on fire for a while. Maybe I was just so focused on taking care of these guys quickly. Okay, I think the other one's spawning the lightning right now. I looked away from it, but he had already started the attack animation. Did he? Oh, maybe he didn't. Or maybe I already... Maybe he did it when I was watching the HP bar tick down from the fire. I was paying attention to the opposite thing this time. And it was cool that I was able to kill both of them at the same time. They were having them both together. Okay, so if I'm remembering correctly, stage 95 starts the series of stages in which it throws one of every enemy in the entire game at you. So one of each enemy. Sort of a variety pack. And it goes in order of their appearance in the campaign. Or in their order of hierarchy. So, yes. You have the low tier enemies. You have a regular Empusa, regular bat. So it's just going up the totem pole. And all of the enemies in the game are divided amongst this floor and the next two. So this floor isn't that bad, and the next one isn't that bad, but the one after it, I have some stuff to say about it. Prioritize the bat, right, because it's ranged and it's in the air. And then I try just taking up the other enemies. I try to save the Death Scissor for after I get these other enemies so I can focus on parrying it, because it's a lot harder to focus on parrying when you're having to think of the other enemies attacking you. But the Death Scissor just keeps on following me around. I think I just wind up whacking it like normal. Shooting it and whacking it like normal. And then maybe I can showcase... Maybe I showcase how you can kill it in one hit with the grab after you break a Scissor Blade. Don't remember, we will see. Yeah, I'm sort of bouncing between the two here since they're both right by me. And the lock-on messed me up there because I did not mean to lock on down there. I meant to lock on the Death Scissor. Oh wow, look at the shadow of the Scissor. That's cool. I don't think I really paid attention to that before. It's not that I thought it didn't have a shadow. Oh, look, I parried it after all. It's not that I thought it didn't have a shadow. It's just that for some reason it stood out there. So yeah, and obviously I saved him for last because he's the slowest one, and I can pretty much avoid him until he's the last one. It was pretty nice. The punch line was keeping him in the air, but just high enough that he was in the air, but still low enough that I could be comboing him on the ground. So now, stage 96 will be the next batch of enemies from the game. One of each, of course. Blade Wizard. Oh yeah, Baphomet. Definitely focus on the Baphomet. And how it works on these floors is only a certain amount of enemies can be spawned in at once. I'm pretty sure. At least on the last one, I know that for a fact. Although I haven't specifically tried waiting and seeing if they all eventually spawn in. I don't intend to wait and test that. Oh, that was close. I'm trying to target the bat right now. The bat! It's the bat! Kill the bat freak. So there, I finally lock onto it, as I was trying to do. Sort of weird doing that jump cancel combo when the camera's to the side like that, because then your directional input has to be from the side when you do the downward thrust instead of back. Well, like backwards relative to Nero, you know how it is. But on the controller, it would be to the left when you're so used to doing it back, since you're used to having the camera directly behind Nero's back. So that should be exploding. Guess it is. Is not enough to kill them, though, at this difficulty. Oh, jumped out of the showdown right before it came out. I tried to parry his mask there. I should practice that a bit more. Because if you parry one of their masks, if you parry them while they're putting on a mask and they drop it, they will try to put on their next mask. And then if you parry that, they will drop it, and then they will be out of masks. And then they literally will not attack at all after that. Because they only attack when they have a mask to hide their faces. So that's the optimal way to deal with him. I just need to practice parrying that more. Okay, 97. 97, there's a Behemoth. And... okay, so... despite this Nilo Angelo being the first enemy that shows up here, this is actually the enemy you are saving for last. But since I have time to kill, you know, I'm doing a little bit of damage to him because he takes so long to kill. I'm not worrying about accidentally killing him anytime soon. The reason you want to leave him on the map until the end is because, like I said, on the last floor, only a certain amount of enemies can spawn in at once. So you want to have the Nilo Angelo taking up one of the memory slots, so to speak. One of the vacancies. You want Nilo Angelo to be using up one of them, so he's blocking out the other enemies from coming in. So you're pretty much just ignoring him for now, shooting him every now and then if you don't have anything else to attack. But focusing the Hell Priest here. Plus, I don't want him to spawn in more enemies. Originally, I would save the Behemoth for last on this map, but this has definitely been working out better for me, saving the Nilo Angelo for last. Okay, finally took out him. So see, as soon as that one goes down, the next enemy comes in. So it appears that only a maximum of 2 enemies can be loaded in here at once. And so if you took out the Nilo Angelo first, and then the Behemoth spawned in, you would not want to deal with the Behemoth and the Hell Priest at the same time. So what I'm waiting for here is, because the Nilo Angelo is so slow, I'm trying to separate the two, and then when I know that the Nilo Angelo is far enough away, I will try to break the buckle on the Behemoth, and then, of course, do my usual grab into showdown. If you can get the positioning just right, you can actually line it up, so that way, if the Nilo Angelo is in front of the Behemoth, you break the buckle, and then when you grab him, you go into the front of the Behemoth. You can actually catch the Nilo Angelo in your grab and in your showdown, which is ideal. So I almost get it here, see? The Nilo Angelo almost gets caught in the grab, and then I think he gets hit a little bit by showdown here. Does he? Yeah, he gets hit a little bit after he hits me, but my armor lets me absorb it, so it's fine. And I don't know why I was using Punchline there. I wonder if that was just nerves getting to me. Maybe I was trying to big brain something. Okay, so Behemoth should be taken care of. And then the Empusa Queen, which should be pretty easy in comparison. And then I think after that is a Fury. And you can deal with the Fury pretty much like you would deal with a Fury on its own, because you're just trying to stay away from the Angelo the whole time. So pretty much once the Angelo catches up to you, change spots on the map. And I'm very hesitant to grab the Empusa Queen here because I don't want to get whacked with the giant sword as I'm doing the grab animation. Too risky at this point. Oh no, there's another one before the Fury. Yeah, take out him. That's a really good move to get in there and interrupt them. Close the distance and interrupt them at the same time. But you've probably realized that by now. Okay, this is the Fury? Yes, it is. So just keep it a one-on-one fight by staying away from the Angelo. And of course, I don't grab the Fury if I'm right by the Angelo like that. Instead, I'll just attack it. That was sort of a cool shot there. I wonder if you paused it and went into photo mode there, if you could get a cool picture with the Angelo standing in front of the Fury and the Fury standing behind the Angelo, because they both looked like they were in a battle pose. I was a little antsy there doing that parry early because of the Angelo right by me. I'd rather do it too early than too late, right? Yeah, so that's a good option if you aren't going to do the grab. That was cool. And because you only have a limited amount of attack, so remember that when you start hitting a Fury, you have a limited number of attacks you can do before they teleport again. It's not based on damage numbers. So you do not want to do the exceed version of the attack that takes you up, because it's a whole bunch of multi-hits, and that'll use up all of your attacks in a very short amount of time without much damage. So you want to do a few attacks that are very hard hitting. You don't want to do a bunch of little attacks because, like I said, it is purely based on the number of attacks and not damage. So don't waste your limited amount of attacks before the Fury teleports again. Should have mentioned that earlier, like on stage 70 or something. Just in case someone watches the video and just watches stage 70 or something. So 98 signals the start of the final stretch, the boss rush. And I think I'm just mentally preparing myself there, standing still. Oh yeah, you get another rest room here, rest area. What do I grab? So, Helter Skelter is not a bad thing to grab here. I don't think I go for it, but Helter Skelter is definitely a good thing to grab here because Helter Skelter has a very specific niche use, and that is breaking guards, and that includes your Urizen's crystal. So, the Helter Skelter, if you charge up the Helter Skelter and use its charged attack, it deals a lot of damage to the crystal. 3 Helter Skelter attacks will delete the crystal. So, if you want to just take out the crystal really fast, if you grab 3 Helter Skelters in a row and you do all 3 of their charged attacks in a row, it should take care of the crystal. But I'm confident enough that I can do this without taking any damage or taking much damage. So I'd rather save my breaker slots for things that would be useful for the fights afterwards. Wow. Right after I say I'm confident. So obviously, you could do this fight quickly, but that giant fireball feels impossible to avoid when you're close up. So I only go up and whack the crystal every now and then when I'm pretty confident that he's not going to do the fireball anytime soon. But for the most part in this fight, I just stay far away because I'm just concerned with getting through this with a lot of HP, because the next fight is the hardest one. The Urizen fight after this is the hardest fight in the game, and it's mostly because of his tentacle attack, which is the most difficult thing to dodge in the entire game. I still haven't really thought of a system for it. You have to kind of just dodge them instinctually. It's not as systematic as any other attack in the game. So I'm pretty much just staying at mid-range so that way I can dodge the fireballs easily but still jump in, you know, go in real fast if I want to do a hit on the crystal face-to-face. And keep in mind that that fireball has a little arc. You put some English on it, so to speak. If there are any bowling fans. Although that's a term in baseball, too. Putting English on something just means you sort of make it arc when you throw it, like a trick shot in baseball. So see it. Oh, that time it didn't look like it arced, but it definitely can arc. Anyways, that's just super hard to dodge up close. If you've thought of a way to dodge the fireball consistently up close, then tell me. I know that it's a lot easier to dodge when you're on the ground. So if you're on the ground and up close, you can dodge roll out of it. But whenever I'm up close, I'm going to be in the air because I want to avoid the lasers and stuff. And if I'm in the air, I can't get to the ground fast enough to avoid the fireball. Another thing to note. So if you find yourself caught in the blue orb, activating, and everything is slowed down, if you activate your Devil Trigger, your iframes are also extended. So activating Devil Trigger when you're caught in that slowdown effect is a pretty good option if you think you're about to get hit by something, because the iframes will be extended. Okay, I'm glad I finished talking about that in time for this fight, because here's my here's my quick kill strategy. So, you want to break the crystal and then kill him before he summons a second crystal, because it'll be prolonged big time. So what you want to do is you want to have at least 5 bars of meter here. If you have at least 5 bars of meter, Showdown will insta-kill the crystal. So make sure you have at least 5 bars of meter when you do the crystal. But as you saw, I was actually ducking under the laser. So if you're directly in front of him and you're doing Showdown, Showdown will actually lower your hurt box a little bit. So that way you can actually duck under the laser as you are damaging the crystal and destroying it very quickly with Showdown. The reason why you want at least 5 bars is because if you have any less than 5 bars when you activate Showdown, the Devil Trigger will run out before Showdown is done, and you won't get as much damage off of it because your damage is buffed in DT, obviously. So, I can't believe I still got the quick kill off because I was getting hit kind of a lot. Okay, see how I activate DT there when he does that big AoE? Normally the AoE would knock you back, but I use the iframes of the Devil Trigger there to stay close. So as soon as he gets staggered, I start charging Buster Arm, and as it's charging, I'm still hitting him with my sword and my spectral swords with the gun button. And then if he has less than half HP when you release Buster Arm in Devil Trigger, it should be enough to kill him. If it does not, he's going to summon his second crystal immediately, and then you have to do all that over again, which sucks. So now the Urizen number 3 fight, this is way easier. Nero just counters this boss big time, so in the campaign you fight against this boss as Dante, and he very much feels balanced around Dante because, first of all, everything Nero has is pretty much a counter to him. Your grab will pull you up to his head so you can stay off the ground indefinitely by just constantly grabbing him, which makes things easy. And then Nero's walking speed is actually faster than Dante's and V's. So Nero's walking speed is actually fast enough to avoid a whole bunch of his projectiles at this phase. So you could play this super safely. Wow, got soccer kick. You can play this safely or just stay right in front of him. This part's pretty easy. I really like the design of this boss fight. Not just the boss himself, but his moves and the context, the story context in which this is happening and the environment. I want to elaborate on it, but I was actually thinking about doing a video analyzing it. I guess I can start talking about it in the meantime because this fight's pretty self-explanatory. Just obviously avoid the projectiles, forehead. Don't get hit, forehead. But anyways, seeing Dante and Vergil's childhood home in the reflection here, it's sort of, and seeing it all break and shatter as Urizen is pretty much abandoning all of his humanity. Its shattering is sort of symbolic of him trying to let go of any sort of positive memories he has of being human, which is, of course, him living with his brother Dante and his mother. It's very symbolic, seeing it all crumble around you and him. And also see, wherever he stands, it sort of erases the ground, because obviously seeing the childhood home here is an illusion that's being projected by the tree. And so wherever he goes, the way it gets erased, it's almost as if he's trying to erase this memory. It's a really subtle touch, and I don't think I've ever heard... I have yet to hear anyone point that out, but it looks like wherever he's walking, he's erasing the illusion of this memory. Like, he's literally trying to stomp out this memory, so that way all he has left is his demonic side and his thirst for power. There's a lot to analyze here. I really like it. And the fact that his attacks are so human... So obviously he's this giant monster now, right? But his attack is this soccer kick and this... You know, he has this super telegraphed punch and this super telegraphed soccer kick, where it looks like the most human thing ever. Because it's not refined, it doesn't look skillful, it doesn't look like a martial artist attack. It just looks like some guy trying to kick someone out of anger. And so despite him being in his most... You know, despite him being in a super powerful form right now, his attacks are so unrefined and human. It's like this is actually the most human and petty thing he's done, despite him trying to abandon his humanity. Anyways, back to the boss fight. This is supposed to be a guide, not a whatever it is I was talking about. Not an analysis on the art design and the direction. But I just really wanted to mention that because I really appreciate everything in this boss fight. And no one really seems to appreciate this boss fight as much as I do. Because the fight itself isn't really that hard. Especially with Nero, like I said. When I did this fight as Dante, to stay in the air long enough, I pretty much just used the motorcycle weapon, Cavalier. I used the one attack with Cavalier that kind of takes you up in the air so I could stay up. So, anyways, the one attack that you really should be careful for is when he summons all those spikes on the ground. Because if you get spiked, if you're low enough on the ground, you will get spiked and stuck in the spikes, and then he will uppercut you. So, if you do get caught in the spikes, you want to immediately use Devil Trigger or break one of your Devil Breakers so you can break free. So make sure that you're staying really high in the air when he's about to do that, and stay in the air, because whether you get spiked in the, whether you get pinned in the spikes or not, he will do the follow-up. So you don't want to avoid the spikes, and then as you're falling, land in his follow-up. You want to avoid all of it. And of course, just keep grabbing him and using the enemy step to jump off of him to reset your air hikes, so you can stay safe away from those lasers. And then you can see he's summoning the spikes, stay high in the air, and then I'm doing an air taunt in between each of my air jumps to stay in the air as long as possible there. I'm actually going off screen a little bit. It seems kind of weird. It seems sort of unintentional. I think they should have... I feel like they should have managed the camera a bit better in this boss fight, but maybe it's just when you're playing Nero, because this is obviously not designed with Nero in mind. And I think he breaks here. Look at this. He's just looking at me. I think I broke the boss at the end, but no complaints here. I'm not complaining. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Okay, so drum roll, please. The final showdown with Vergil himself. And there's something really exciting I actually want to show you in this fight, but I want to keep the suspense, so I won't say it just yet. Anyways, there's a plethora of ways to go about fighting him, right? What I do is sort of a balance between just practicality and a little bit of style. Wow, that was embarrassing getting hit right there. So obviously that's a big opening for you to do a combo. This is the, more or less, this is the combo I pretty much go for. And then I do the dive down. It's a pretty good amount of damage there, without the inputs being too difficult. And I don't hit him there, but if you parry that projectile at the right time, it'll actually hit him, and it'll lead to another opening where you can combo him. It's a timing thing, though. But it's not a big deal if you miss it, because if you parry it and you don't hit him, it's not as if you get hurt, so nothing gained, nothing lost. And as you saw there, I used the Bringer Knuckle to keep him from getting knocked away, so I can go into that combo. And I deal a pretty good amount of damage. I was too far away to manage to get that to work. Oh wow, I barely avoid that Judgment Cut. So when he's doing Judgment Cut, sometimes if you're close enough, you can dive in and combo him after avoiding Judgment Cut. Most of the time, though, I just shoot him if I'm too far away. And when he's about this much HP, he will activate his Devil Trigger. About 55% HP, it looks like. 55-60% HP, he activates Devil Trigger. And I recommend just not attacking him at all when he's in Devil Trigger. It's better to just wait it out. Every now and then, I will shoot him just during the little openings like that, but that's because I'm being brave. I don't necessarily recommend attacking him at all when he's in DT, but I just like shooting him in between to test myself, I guess. Because look at that. Free damage. So I would just limit it to shooting him only when he's in Devil Triggered. Like if you're able to avoid a Judgment Cut by a lot and you have the extra real estate. I didn't do it in here, but you see that attack? Okay, I'll talk about it later. So he's about to fly. He's about to do his aerial strike. Look at this. You can actually grab him out of the air. Look at this. What, Tanuki? How could you fail that? Will I get it this time? Yes, I will. I tried it again. So that's pretty sick, needless to say. And then you get a full combo after that. So I just go to town after that. That's a lot of damage in a short amount of time between the grab and that. Anyways, what I was going to say is that shower attack where he summons in all those swords above you and they shower down. If you activate Devil Trigger at the right time, it'll actually parry it and deal some damage to him, but I didn't want to risk it because I never practiced that enough. So he's doing more Judgment Cut. And you see, if I clear the Judgment Cut by enough, I will dive in. And once he's low on health, he's going to start turtling like this. The combo where you do attack, attack, pause, mash, attack. That attack actually breaks guards very easily. So when he's blocking, you can do that string to break his guard. Or if you still have Helter Skelters, you can use it to break his guard. And now he is staggered, and I don't even need to use Buster Arm here. I can just activate DT and grab him like normal. Because he's so low. Very nice. Very clean attempt, if I do say so myself. And then we get a unique little cutscene here, which is not in the main game. So that's really cool that it has its own unique cutscenes that were animated specifically for this. And excuse me for keeping you in suspense when I whiffed that first grab, but that was such a hype moment, I had to build it up. So the timing feels pretty strict on that because obviously I've practiced that before attempting it here, but be my guest if you want to practice that. Let me know how that went for you because that's really cool. I didn't know about that. Obviously, I didn't know about that when I fought him in the main game, and I found out later. And when I heard you could grab him out of the air, I thought, what? I had to try that myself, which I did, and I'm glad I got to do that. So the main things I wanted to do, the most impressive things, at least from a personal satisfaction standpoint, in this are my strategy on stage 70, my quick kill method against Urizen number 2, and then grabbing Vergil out of the air. Those are the 3 things I really wanted to get, and I got all 3 in this run, which is very nice. So I'm glad I did that. And I goofed all 3 of those things in my very first successful run, so I'm glad I waited on uploading that because I knew I could do a better run, which I was right about. And also, just by waiting, coincidentally, I get to do it to commemorate the anniversary for my favorite game. So, I hope you guys found that helpful or just entertaining at the very least. And let me know if you have any questions. I will try to answer them as best as possible. And, of course, if you have any other thoughts, do share them in the comments. I stream every week on Twitch. I will include that link in the description, and I will also include the link to my Twitter in the description. So, I will see you Tanukers later.